Welcome to Fluent Daily, the English listening channel for advanced learners at B2 and C1 level. Every episode features a rich, flowing conversation in natural English on a topic that is genuinely worth thinking about: history, psychology, science, philosophy, and more. There are no simplified sentences here, no slow speech, no vocabulary drills. Just real English spoken naturally on ideas that matter. This is Fluent Daily. Let's get into it.
Today we have a great story, so let's get started right now. If you sit in a beige waiting room for, just 10 minutes without your phone, without a magazine, with absolutely nothing to do, your brain actually alters its neurochemistry to torture you.
Oh, absolutely. It's brutal.
Right. It literally slows down its own internal clock so that you feel every single agonizing second. It's just an incredibly unpleasant experience. But if you take that exact same brain and drop it into a state of deep focus, say, reading an incredible book or playing a perfectly balanced game hours will simply vanish without a trace.
Just gone.
Yeah, gone. The clock on the wall ticks at exactly the same mechanical rate, but your reality warps entirely.
It is, it's the ultimate perceptual paradox. Time is the most universally shared human experience.
Yeah.
We all feel the passage of duration, the momentum of the present moving forward into the future.
Exactly.
But no two people experience the same objective duration in the same way. The architecture of your mind actively constructs your experience of time, and it is full of, systematic biases, blind spots, and distortions.
Which is exactly why we are diving into this today. I want to welcome you, the listener, to our deep dive into the psychology of time.
We've got a fascinating stack of sources today.
We really do. Some incredible texts on the cognitive, neural, and linguistic foundations of time. And our mission today is to fundamentally break apart how you perceive the ticking clock. We are going to explore why time flies when you're having fun, why years seem to terrifyingly speed up as you get older.
Which is a very real phenomenon, by the way.
Oh, I feel it every year. And we'll get into how your brain actually keeps track of seconds versus days, and how the specific grammatical structure of the language you speak literally alters your perception of the past and the future.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this, because my default assumption, and I think, most people's assumption, is that there is some central biological metronome in there, like a single master clock sitting in the center of the brain tracking time for us.
Right. That's the most common intuition, and it is entirely false.
Wait,
Completely false. There is no single master clock in the human brain. We don't have a dedicated structure that measures objective time the way a quartz wristwatch does.
So what's actually happening?
Instead, your temporal perception is basically a hallucination built from the highly coordinated activity of completely different neural systems. And the wild part is that these systems operate at entirely different timescales using completely different hardware.
So it's not a metronome, it's more like a chaotic orchestra with 3 different conductors, and they're all managing completely different sections of the symphony.
That's a great way to picture it, yeah.
Let's break down those conductors then. The first one is operating at a blistering speed, right? The sub-second time scale.
Exactly. So when we talk about the sub-second time scale, we are talking about the hardware your brain uses to catch a beat, or to understand the rapid cadence of human speech, or to execute incredibly precise motor control like hitting a tennis ball.
Something that requires split-second timing.
Right. And the primary neural structure handling this ultra-fast timing is the cerebellum. It provides the precise sequencing of motor movements. It doesn't care about what time of day it is. It only cares about the microscopic temporal structure of the immediate physical environment.
So the cerebellum is like the percussionist keeping the rapid, immediate beat of our physical interactions.
Hook on.
But then we zoom out to the time scale where we actually feel like we are experiencing time. The seconds to minutes time scale. If I ask you to guess when a minute has passed, the cerebellum isn't doing that work, is it?
No. A completely different part of the brain steps in for that. For the seconds to minutes timescale, the brain shifts the workload primarily to the basal ganglia and the supplementary motor area.
Okay, the basal ganglia.
Yeah, these regions form a distinct circuit that calculates conscious duration. And this specific circuit is deeply, deeply reliant on dopamine.
Hold on, so my impatience isn't just a personality flaw, it's a literal dopamine crash in my basal ganglia.
It quite literally is. The level of dopamine in your system directly dictates the speed of this internal timing circuit.
Oh, wow.
To understand how this works, Cognitive neuroscientists often use a model called the pacemaker accumulator.
Pacemaker accumulator. Okay, break that down for me.
Think of the pacemaker as a leaky faucet that drips discrete units or pulses of time, and the accumulator is a bucket that catches these drips.
All right, I'm picturing a leaky faucet and a bucket.
Good.
Yeah.
The more drips in the bucket, the more time your brain thinks has passed.
Hey, I like that analogy. So where does dopamine come into play with the faucet and the bucket?
Dopamine controls the valve on the faucet. When you have high dopaminergic activity, say you take a stimulant, or you are in a state of high physiological arousal, excitement, or anticipation, the valve opens wide.
So it drips faster.
Exactly. The faucet drips incredibly fast. The pacemaker speeds up.
So my bucket is filling up with time pulses much faster than usual. If my bucket hits the, let's call it the 5-minute mark, I feel like 5 minutes have passed. But because my dopamine-fueled brain was dripping those pulses so fast, maybe only 3 minutes of objective time have actually gone by in the real world.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Your internal clock is racing ahead of objective reality. Because your internal clock is moving faster, the outside world feels like it is moving in slow motion.
Because less objective time has passed than my brain expected?
Yes. Now, reverse the scenario. Let's look at conditions that drastically reduce your dopamine levels, states of anxiety, sadness, boredom, or the sheer agony of being stuck in a traffic jam.
Oh, so the valve tightens. The faucet drips incredibly slowly.
Yes. Your internal clock slows to an absolute crawl. What's fascinating here is how perfectly this maps onto your everyday misery.
Right, the waiting room.
Exactly. Because your internal clock is dripping pulses so slowly, it takes a massive amount of real-world time for your bucket to fill up to that 5-minute mark.
Oh man, so you stand on that line, your slow internal clock finally registers the 5 minutes have passed.
But you look at your watch and 15 minutes of objective time have gone by.
Because the objective world has sped past you, making the wait feel agonizingly long.
Yep.
This makes so much sense. We constantly use the phrase time dragged, and it turns out our neurochemical clock was literally dragging.
It's a very literal biological phenomenon.
Now, just to finish out our orchestra analogy, we have the third conductor, we've got the cerebellum handling milliseconds, the basal ganglia handling minutes, but who is pacing the entire evening? Like, who is tracking the days?
That long-term timing relies on the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
The suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Yeah, it's a tiny region situated in the hypothalamus. This is your circadian clock.
Ah, the circadian rhythm.
Exactly. It governs the massive, slow rhythms of your biology, your sleep-wake cycles, body temperature fluctuations, and daily hormone secretions. It's basically syncing your internal biology to the rotation of the planet.
It is genuinely incredible that we feel like we exist on one smooth, continuous timeline, when in reality we are seamlessly bouncing between a metronome in the cerebellum, a leaky dopamine faucet in the basal ganglia, and literally a planetary clock in the hypothalamus.
It's a masterclass in biological
It
illusion.
really is. But knowing how that middle clock works, that dopamine-driven seconds-to-minute circuit, brings us to this massive kind of brain-breaking realization about the human experience that the sources pointed out.
Oh, the dissociation.
Yes, how we experience time in the moment is entirely disconnected from how we remember it.
This phenomenon is called the dissociation of estimation. And it is perhaps the most counterintuitive reality in all of time psychology.
I couldn't agree more.
The mechanisms your brain uses to track time while an event is happening are fundamentally different from the mechanisms your brain uses to evaluate that same time period when looking back on it.
They don't even talk to each other.
No, they operate on completely conflicting sets of rules.
We have to unpack this because it dictates so much of our happiness if you really think about it. Let's look at the two mechanisms. Perspective duration estimation, which is how you judge time right now, in the moment.
Right.
And retrospective duration estimation, which is how you judge time in your memory. Let's start with perspective. When I am in the middle of doing something, how does my brain decide if time is flying or crawling?
Well, prospective time estimation relies on the allocation of your cognitive resources.
Cognitive resources, like attention.
Exactly. Imagine your attention is a spotlight with a strictly limited amount of energy. If you are deeply immersed in a complex, demanding task, say, navigating a difficult conversation, playing a sport, or trying to solve a puzzle, your brain allocates almost all of its available cognitive resources to that primary task.
Because it takes everything you've got to focus on it.
Right. And because your attention is a finite resource, you simply do not have any spare bandwidth left over to monitor the passage of time.
So the time monitoring system just gets starved of energy and shuts down.
Exactly. Because you aren't paying attention to time, the duration feels incredibly short. You emerge from like a 3-hour deep work session, and it feels like 30 minutes.
That is the biological architecture of a flow state.
It is. But what happens when you are disengaged?
Well, that brings us back to the beige waiting room. I have no task. My attention spotlight has absolutely nothing to illuminate. So my cognitive resources are freed up, and they immediately default to monitoring the clock.
They look for something to do.
Right. I become hyper-aware of every single second passing. Because I am dedicating 100% of my attentional bandwidth to tracking the duration, the interval feels excruciatingly long.
That is perspective time in a nutshell. It is a function of where your attention is pointed. But the moment the event ends, the entire rule book is thrown out the window.
Completely tossed out.
Yeah. If a week passes and I ask you, how long did that waiting room experience feel?
Right.
You are now using retrospective duration estimation. You're no longer allocating attention. You're consulting your memory.
And the rule for retrospective time isn't about attention at all.
Yeah.
It's about memory density.
Yes. When your brain attempts to reconstruct the length of a past event, it doesn't have a chronological tape recorder to play back. It has to estimate the duration based on how many distinct novel events, changes, or memory traces were encoded during that period.
So more memories equals more time.
Exactly. The denser the memories, the longer the subjective duration.
Okay, let's use a real-world example for the listener to show how these two mechanisms violently collide. Let's say I go on a 1-week vacation to a city I have never been to before, like Tokyo.
Great example.
Every single day, I am navigating an unfamiliar subway system. I am translating signs in a language I don't speak. I am trying bizarre new foods. The smells are different. The social rules are different. That is incredibly demanding on my cognitive resources.
Highly demanding.
So, prospectively, in the moment, I am so engaged with survival and exploration that I am not monitoring time at all. The days just fly by.
But then you fly home. A week later, you look back at your time in Tokyo. Your brain scans that interval and finds an absolute mountain of dense, novel memory traces.
Hundreds of mental Polaroids.
Yes, you have hundreds of distinct mental Polaroids of new experiences. Because the memory density is so high, your retrospective estimation stretches that week out. It feels like you were living there for a month.
Wow. But then let's flip it. Let's look at my regular life. Just a routine week at the office. I commute the exact same route. I sit at the exact same desk. I have the exact same budget meeting with the exact same people.
Very predictable.
Right. I am practically sleepwalking. Prospectively, because I don't need any cognitive resources to survive this routine, my brain is free to monitor the clock, the afternoon drags, the week feels like an eternity while I am living it.
And then you reach Saturday. You look back at the week. Your brain attempts to reconstruct the timeline, but it finds almost zero distinct memory traces.
Because I didn't encode anything new.
Exactly. Because nothing novel happened, Tuesday is indistinguishable from Thursday. The entire week collapses into a single blurry file in your brain. The memory density is incredibly low, so retrospectively, the week feels impossibly short. It feels like it just vanished.
This is genuinely a tragedy of human psychology. Think about the tension here. The exact conditions that make life feel pleasant, fast, and frictionless in the present moment, flow, routine, comfort, are the very conditions that erase your life from your memory.
It's a very cruel paradox.
It is. And conversely, if you want your life to feel long, rich, and expansive when you look back on it, you have to subject yourself to the exhaustion of constant novelty. So does this mean that if you want to feel like you've truly lived a long life, you actually have to sacrifice your daily comfort? Like, do you have to actively seek out exhausting, highly effortful friction all the time?
It is a profound existential trade-off. And yes, to a significant degree, securing a rich retrospective timeline requires you to tolerate the friction of novelty in the present.
That is tough to swallow.
It is. But if you optimize entirely for daily comfort and frictionless routine, you are effectively putting your memory density on a flat line. Your retrospective assessment will find empty intervals, and your life will feel compressed.
Which perfectly explains the most universal temporal complaint in human history, why time speeds up as we age.
Ah, yes. The aging acceleration.
Every single person over the age of 30 wakes up one day and says, "Where did the year go? The years are flying by." We actually have 3 distinct frameworks from the sources to explain this terrifying acceleration, starting with a mathematical concept from an 1877 French philosopher named Paul Janet. It's called the proportional account.
The proportional account is elegant and mathematically unforgiving. It proposes that our subjective experience of a duration is proportional to the total length of life we have already accumulated.
Right. So imagine you are a 5-year-old child. One single year of your life represents 20% of your entire existence on this planet.
That's a massive chunk of time.
Right. A 3-month summer vacation is a statistically massive fraction of everything you have ever known. Of course it feels like an eternity.
But if you are 50 years old, 1 year is a mere 2% of your accumulated life. The objective duration of 365 days represents a drastically shrinking fraction of your total experience. Therefore, the subjective weight of that year is significantly lighter, and it naturally feels shorter.
The math is brutal, but it's also a bit abstract. The second framework, the memory density account, provides the actual psychological mechanism for why our years compress, and it ties directly back to what we were just discussing about routine.
Exactly. The memory density account argues that the speeding up of time is not just a mathematical illusion. It is a direct consequence of how our lives become structured as we age. Think about the first 2 decades of human life. They are structurally engineered to bombard you with extreme novelty.
It's a literal fire hose of new data. You are learning to walk, going to a new school every few years, having your first kiss, learning to drive, navigating your first heartbreak, moving away from home, starting your first real job.
It never stops.
Every single month is a distinct, deeply emotional, entirely novel environment.
And because of that, your brain is frantically laying down dense, highly detailed memory traces to help you navigate this constant influx of the unknown. So when you are 25 and you look back on your life, your retrospective duration estimation has an encyclopedic volume of memories to sort through.
So the timeline feels incredibly long.
Yes. But then you enter middle adulthood.
The great consolidation.
Yes, the great consolidation. You find a career path. You settle into a geographic location. You establish a long-term relationship. The sheer volume of novel experiences drops precipitously.
Because you figured things out.
Right. The cognitive demands of your environment become predictable. You don't need to lay down new memory traces to survive Tuesday morning anymore. So when your brain performs a retrospective duration assessment of your 40th year, it finds a filing cabinet that is largely empty. The year compresses.
And the third framework, the neuroscientific account, suggests this isn't just about the external events in our lives. It's about the physical meat of the brain changing.
Precisely. A child's brain is not just learning. It is physically rewiring itself at an astonishing rate. It is generating new neural structures, synapses, and pruning connections constantly.
Just a whirlwind of construction.
Exactly. This intensely high rate of physiological change may serve as the biological correlate for that slow, rich experience of time. An adult brain, however, has largely established its foundational architecture.
So it's more rigid.
When an adult learns something new, they are typically hanging a new fact on a pre-existing structural framework rather than building the framework from scratch. Because the brain's physical state is changing much more slowly, its processing of time reflects that stability.
This is such a critical takeaway for anyone listening. We cannot change the mathematical proportion of our lives. A year will always be a smaller percentage of your life than the year before, and we cannot entirely reverse the physiological consolidation of our adult brains.
No, we can't.
But we do have agency over our memory density. Deliberately injecting novelty into your life, like taking a drastically different route to work, or joining a club for a hobby you are, frankly, terrible at, traveling somewhere where you don't speak the language. These aren't just fun leisure activities.
Not at all.
They are psychologically grounded interventions to literally slow down the subjective passage of your adult life.
You are intentionally providing your brain with the raw architectural materials it needs to construct a long, meaningful retrospective timeline. You are breaking the efficiency of routine to save your memory.
Wait, if our memory is completely overwriting our actual in-the-moment experience, that creates a terrifying problem.
Yeah.
Which version of you is actually making decisions? The you who lived through an event or the you who remembers it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because if they wildly disagree on how an event felt, one of them has to be in the driver's seat.
This brings us to the groundbreaking work of Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. He formalized this dilemma into the distinction between the experiencing self and the remembering self. And it is vital to understand that they are entirely distinct entities with completely different agendas.
So what's the difference?
The experiencing self is the entity that lives through reality sequentially, moment by moment. It answers the question, how does this feel right now?
Okay, but the remembering self is the historian. It evaluates the past after the fact. It answers the question, how was it overall? And the remembering self is the one calling the shots.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the remembering self is an absolute tyrant. It dictates your future choices, it decides whether you will repeat an experience, and it entirely governs what you report as your overall well-being.
That's crazy. So the experiencing self does all the actual living and suffering, but its voice is almost entirely ignored when it comes time to make a decision.
Largely, yes. And the remembering self has an incredibly bizarre, almost irrational set of rules for how it evaluates the past. It does not look at a spreadsheet of your moment-to-moment happiness. It relies on something Kahneman called the peak-end rule.
The peak-end rule. And the most vivid, visceral way to explain this is the famous colonoscopy study.
Oh, the Kahneman and Riddlemeyer study. It perfectly exposes the cognitive blind spots of the remembering self.
Okay, if you're listening, picture this. You have two patients undergoing a colonoscopy, which, especially back when this study was done, was a highly uncomfortable, painful procedure. Let's look at patient A.
Okay.
Patient A has a fast procedure. It only lasts 10 minutes. But the doctor is aggressive, and the final few minutes of that procedure are intensely, violently painful, high peak pain and high pain at the very end.
Right.
Then you have patient B. Patient B has a much longer ordeal. Their procedure lasts 25 minutes. They experience every single ounce of pain that patient A experienced, plus an extra 15 minutes of agonizing discomfort.
So from a purely mathematical, logical standpoint, patient B suffered significantly more total cumulative pain. Their experiencing self endured a vastly worse overall ordeal.
Exactly. If you add up the pain minutes, patient B is the clear loser. But for patient B, the doctor leaves the scope in for a few extra minutes without moving it at the very end. It's still uncomfortable, but it's much less painful than the peak. So the procedure ends on a relatively milder note.
And this is where it gets strange.
Yes. When Kahneman interviewed these patients afterward and asked them to rate the total severity of the experience, the results defy logic. Patient B, the one who suffered for 25 minutes, rated the experience as significantly less painful overall than patient A, who only suffered for 10.
This is the peak-end rule in action. The remembering self does not calculate an average of your pain or pleasure across a duration. It practically ignores the total sum.
It just doesn't care.
No. Instead, it forms its entire evaluation based on just two data points. The peak intensity of the experience, so the best or worst moment, and how the experience ended.
And the flip side of this rule is the phenomenon of duration neglect. The remembering self simply doesn't care how long an experience lasts.
Correct. The actual length of an episode contributes almost nothing to its retrospective evaluation. Patient B's remembering self completely neglected the fact that they were in pain for an extra 15 minutes, simply because the ending was less severe.
Here's where it gets really interesting for our own lives, because this isn't just about medical procedures, it's about how we design our happiness. Let's say you have a quiet hobby. You love gardening.
Nice and peaceful.
Right. You go out every evening for an hour, and it gives your experiencing self a wonderful, steady hum of ongoing, pleasant contentment. If you add up all those hours over a year, that is a massive volume of total cumulative joy.
But there are no extreme adrenaline peaks, and there is no climactic finale.
Exactly.
Because of duration neglect and the peak-end rule, your remembering self will massively undervalue that gardening. When you reflect on your year, the remembering self will glaze over those hundreds of hours of quiet joy.
It won't even register them.
Right. Instead, it will disproportionately weigh the one weekend you went whitewater rafting, where you were terrified out of your mind for 3 hours, which is a huge peak, but survived and drank a beer on the shore with your friends, which is a great end.
So we are faced with this impossible choice of how to allocate our time. Do you optimize your life to satisfy the experiencing self, focusing on daily, continuous, quiet joy? Or do you optimize for dramatic peaks and satisfying endings to feed the remembering self, knowing that the remembering self is the one writing your life story?
It's a tough call.
There's no right answer, but knowing that the tension exists allows you to stop feeling guilty about wanting both.
Exactly. It grants you the self-awareness to curate your life. You can deliberately maintain the routines that nourish your experiencing self, while occasionally engineering manufactured peaks to satisfy your remembering self.
So the remembering self is a tyrant that warps the past. But what happens when we look forward? How do we evaluate the future? Because it turns out the sources show we are exceptionally terrible at that too.
Oh, we are awful at it. This introduces the concept of temporal discounting, a foundational pillar of behavioral economics. Temporal discounting is the phenomenon where humans consistently, universally devalue future rewards relative to present ones.
We just can't wait.
Right. The further away a consequence or a reward is in time, the less psychological weight it carries today.
This is the invisible force ruining our lives. It is the reason I will eat a donut today, even though I desperately want to be healthy next year. It's why people don't save for retirement. It's why governments fail to pass climate legislation. The present version of ourselves always robs the future version of ourselves.
And this cognitive bias is not a smooth, linear decline. It follows a very specific mathematical trajectory known as a hyperbolic discounting curve.
The hyperbolic curve is where human logic completely fractures. Let's run the classic thought experiment for you, the listener. If I offer you a choice, I will give you $100 right now, today, or I will give you $110 tomorrow. What do you choose?
Almost everyone takes the $100 today.
You refuse to wait 24 hours for a 10% return. The proximity of the immediate reward is overwhelmingly seductive.
Your discount rate for that single day of delay is astronomically high. You are severely penalizing the future reward simply because the present reward is tangible and immediate.
But then we push the timeline back. I ask you, would you rather I give you $100 in exactly 30 days or $110 in exactly 31 days? Suddenly, everyone's logic flips.
They do.
People say, well, if I'm already waiting a whole month, I might as well wait one single extra day to get the extra $10. You choose the $110.
Which highlights the profound irrationality of the system. The delay is identically 1 day in both scenarios. The financial differential is identically $10. Logically, your preference shouldn't change.
But the proximity to the present moment warps the gravity of the decision. When the choice involves right now, the future is heavily discounted. When both choices are exiled into the abstract future, suddenly we become highly rational, patient economic actors. Our preferences flip entirely based on where we are standing on the timeline.
That preference reversal is the signature of hyperbolic discounting. The curve is incredibly steep for near-term delays. We deeply discount things that require us to wait even slightly. But the curve flattens out for delays in the distant future.
It's so frustrating.
It creates a tragic paradox where your choices in the present constantly betray your own long-term goals. You fully intend to save money next month, but when next month becomes today, the present reward of spending it suddenly dominates your decision-making.
Wait, you're calling hyperbolic discounting irrational, but I actually completely disagree. If we look at this through the lens of evolutionary biology, this isn't a cognitive flaw or a bug in the software.
Oh, I see where you're going.
If I'm an early human forager out on the savannah hundreds of thousands of years ago, taking the guaranteed 100 calories today instead of waiting for 110 calories tomorrow is the smartest, most rational thing I can do.
Because tomorrow isn't guaranteed.
Exactly. The future was terrifyingly volatile. A predator could eat me tonight. A rival tribe could steal the food. A storm could wash it away. Taking the immediate payout was a vital survival feature, not a bug.
You are absolutely right to defend the evolutionary logic. In the ancestral environment, hyperbolic discounting was brilliantly adaptive. The cognitive system was appropriately weighting the severe uncertainty and mortality risks of a volatile world. A bird in the hand was literally worth more than two in the bush because the bush might catch fire.
The problem isn't our brains. The problem is the evolutionary mismatch. This deeply ingrained survival mechanism worked perfectly right up until we invented modern civilization. We invented structurally guaranteed futures. We invented 401ks, compound interest, 30-year fixed mortgages, and preventative medicine.
That is the crux of the mismatch. Our modern institutions rely on stable, extended time horizons. If you put money in an index fund, the mathematical probability of it growing over 30 years is extremely high. The reward is highly reliable.
But your biological hardware is freaking out.
Right. Your hardware, forged on the savannah, is screaming at you that the future is an illusion and you need to consume the resources immediately. We are asking an ancient, survival-oriented brain to navigate the delayed gratification of modern capitalism, and it produces systematic short-termism.
It's basically the caveman brain trying to trade stocks. We are fighting millions of years of evolution every time we try to diet. Now, we've covered the biology, the memory systems, the psychological biases, and the evolutionary history of time. But there is one final layer to this puzzle that is entirely distinct. Time is not just a biological phenomenon. Time is linguistic.
Yes.
The shape of time in your mind is fundamentally governed by the words you speak.
This introduces the fascinating realm of linguistic relativity. Time is inherently abstract. You cannot see it, touch it, or hold it. Because it is an invisible concept, human languages are forced to use spatial metaphors to conceptualize it.
We have to map it onto something physical.
We map the abstract concept of time onto physical space. But how different languages draw that map varies wildly, and it literally alters how their speakers think.
Let's start with English, because the English spatial metaphor is so ubiquitous we don't even realize it's a metaphor. English speakers conceptualize time as a horizontal line on the ground, and we are walking along it.
Like a road.
Right. The past is physically behind us. The future is physically ahead of us. We look forward to the weekend. We put our mistakes behind us. Deadlines are approaching us. It is all about forward and backward motion on a horizontal plane.
And we take that forward-facing progression as a self-evident truth of reality. But cross-cultural linguistics reveals that this is merely one way to structure the illusion.
Exactly. Let's look at the Aymara people, an indigenous group in the Andes of Bolivia. Their linguistic paradigm for time completely reverses the English model, and honestly, it blew my mind.
It's a wonderful example.
For the Aymara, the spatial metaphor dictates that the past is in front of them and the future is behind them.
When you first hear that as an English speaker, it sounds backwards. But when you examine the logical premise the Aymara use, it is arguably more rational than the English metaphor.
It makes perfect, undeniable sense. The Aymara reasoning is based entirely on visibility. What is the past? The past is an event that has already happened. Therefore, it has been seen, it is known, it is factual.
Because you can see the past with your mind's eye, it must naturally be located in front of you, in your field of vision.
And conversely, the future is unknown. It hasn't happened yet. You cannot see what will happen tomorrow. Therefore, logically, the future must be located out of your sightline behind your back.
As time passes, the invisible future moves from behind you, materializes into the present, and then extends out in front of you as the visible past.
It is a stunningly poetic and profoundly logical way to view existence. You are walking backwards into the future, staring at the landscape of the past as it stretches out in front of you. But that's just a reversed horizontal plane. Mandarin Chinese introduces an entirely different axis.
Yes, while Mandarin Chinese uses horizontal metaphors, it also heavily relies on a vertical spatial metaphor for time. Earlier events are conceptualized as being above, and later events are conceptualized as being below.
So for a Mandarin speaker, time isn't just a line on the ground, it's a stack moving downwards. Last month is physically above this month.
Exactly. And the crucial finding from cognitive psychology is that this isn't just a linguistic quirk, it actually shapes spatial reasoning.
Really? How so?
In experimental settings, when researchers ask bilingual Mandarin English speakers to organize a chronological series of pictures, their physical arrangement of the photos changes depending on which language they are currently being primed with.
So the language they are using in that exact moment changes how they organize time physically.
Yes. The words you use literally rebuild the spatial architecture of time in your mind.
That is wild. And it goes beyond just grammar and metaphors. There is also a massive cultural and individual variance in how we orient our attention toward time. The psychologist Philip Zimbardo created something called the Zimbardo Time Perspective Inventory, which maps out how our dominant temporal focus predicts the entire trajectory of our lives.
Zimbardo identified several distinct time perspectives that govern human behavior. You have individuals who are dominantly past-oriented. They might look back with deep nostalgia, valuing tradition, family history, and established rituals. Or, on the flip side, they might be trapped in past negative rumination, constantly reliving old traumas and failures.
Then you have the present hedonistic profile. These are the people living entirely in the moment. They optimize for immediate sensation, excitement, and pleasure. They aren't thinking about the consequences tomorrow. They are chasing the dopamine spike right now.
Contrasted with the present fatalistic profile, these individuals also live in the present, but not out of a desire for pleasure.
Right. It's darker than that.
They believe they have no agency over their lives. They feel that fate or institutions or luck control everything, so there is no point in planning for a future they can't influence. They simply endure the present.
And finally, you have the future-oriented profile. These are the planners. They are constantly delaying gratification, living in spreadsheets, avoiding risks, and making sacrifices today for a payoff that might be decades away. And your dominant profile dictates almost every major outcome in your life.
It is highly predictive. Future-oriented individuals generally achieve higher educational outcomes, have better financial stability, and exhibit vastly superior preventative health behaviors. They go to the dentist, they exercise, they don't smoke.
But they probably forget to actually enjoy life.
Exactly. They often suffer from higher chronic stress and an inability to actually enjoy the fruits of their labor. Present hedonistic individuals, meanwhile, might struggle financially and take dangerous health risks, but they often report higher levels of spontaneous daily joy and robust social connections.
This raises an important question, though. Can you change this? Is a present fatalistic person doomed to that perspective, or is this something we can actively rewrite?
Well, Zimbardo argued for achieving a balanced time perspective. The goal is cognitive flexibility. You want to be able to seamlessly shift your temporal orientation depending on the demands of the situation.
So matching the mindset to the moment.
Yes. You want to be future-oriented when sitting down with your financial advisor, present hedonistic when attending a friend's wedding, and past positive when gathering with your family for a holiday. Pathology arises when you are rigidly locked into only one perspective.
To wrap up this linguistic and cognitive dimension, I want to look at one specific piece of English grammar. I think it serves as the perfect metaphor for everything we've discussed today. The present perfect tense. For anyone who has ever tried to learn English as a second language, you know the 12 tense aspect combinations are an absolute nightmare.
So they are notoriously frustrating for learners because they violate simple chronology. They aren't just objective timestamps on a timeline. They are deeply subjective psychological markers.
Let's compare two very simple sentences. First, the simple past, I lost my keys. Second, the present perfect, I have lost my keys. If you look at them purely chronologically, they describe the exact same physical event. The keys went missing sometime in the past, but psychologically, they are communicating two radically different realities.
Yes, the simple past, I lost my keys, is merely a historical report. It places the event in the past and leaves it there, sealed off. It implies no necessary connection to the present. You might have found them since, or you might have bought a new lock. But the present perfect, I have lost my keys, operates on the level of pragmatics.
Pragmatics, the unspoken context. When I say I have lost my keys, the past action of losing them is actually secondary. What I am really asserting is the ongoing urgent relevance of that past event right now.
The problem is still alive.
Exactly. The keys are still missing. I am currently locked out of my house. I am currently panicking. The physical action is in the past, but the psychological state is profoundly, agonizingly present.
The present perfect is a grammatical bridge. It drags the past forward into the present moment. And in many ways, that encapsulates the entire psychology of time. We are never just passively observing a chronological line. Our present reality is constantly being shaped, defined, colored, and haunted by how we conceptualize the past and anticipate the future.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this massive journey home. Time is not a ticking clock on the wall. It is not an unyielding physical law that you have to submit to.
Subjective time is an active neurochemical construction project. It is driven by the speed of dopamine dripping in your basal ganglia. It is stretched wide and compressed tightly by the sheer density of your novel memories. It is warped by the evolutionary legacy of a caveman brain that biases us heavily toward the present moment. And its very shape is dictated by the spatial metaphors embedded in the language we speak.
And understanding these underlying mechanisms gives you, the listener, a profound level of agency over your own life. You are not a passive passenger on the timeline. If you want your life to feel longer, richer, and more vibrant when you look back on it, you now know the mechanics. You have to break your routines.
Yes, embrace the unknown.
You have to endure the friction of novelty to increase your memory density. If you want to secure your financial and physical future, you know you have to actively outsmart your own hyperbolic discounting, recognizing that your brain is artificially devaluing tomorrow.
It is about reclaiming your temporal agency. Once you understand the biases of the machinery that perceives time, you can optimize for it. You can recognize when your experiencing self needs the comfort of routine, and when your remembering self desperately needs a highly salient peak experience to anchor a memory.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought, something for you to experiment with in your own life this week. We know the rules now. We know that intense focus makes the present speed, but that's prospective time. We know that rich novelty makes the past stretch out. That's retrospective time. And we know Kahneman's golden rule. The remembering self judges an entire experience based almost exclusively on its peak intensity and how it ends.
The peak end rule.
So what if you purposefully hacked Kahneman's peak end rule on a totally mundane, boring day? Let's say it's a regular, predictable Tuesday. What if you engineered a tiny, completely novel peak in the middle of your day, like driving to a different town just to buy a coffee, or calling someone you haven't spoken to in 5 years.
Just a spike of novelty.
Right. And then what if you deliberately engineered a highly satisfying, intentional end to your evening, like watching a brilliant film instead of doom scrolling?
By manipulating just those two specific moments, the peak and the end, you would be feeding your remembering self the exact data points it requires to fundamentally upgrade its evaluation of the entire day.